When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at Accenture.com/Spotify.
Well, it's my whole life kind of drove me to write that book, but to be more specific, I started questioning history long ago because what I was learning in school wasn't matching up so much with a lot of the books I was reading, nor some of the shows, some of the documentary shows on television. So I decided to get my own answers, and I started that around the mid '90s, and came out with a number of books, and this book here, Ancient Egypt 9000. I actually spent a month in Egypt with Chris Dunn. So the book has a lot of my experiences from being in Egypt. Plus, what I really wanted to do with the book, I wanted to try and paint a large picture of the whole mythology and the whole story and the whole history behind ancient Egypt. So in the chapters, I picked out various segments. Each chapter is actually kind of a little essay on a certain section of Egyptology. That way, I could give the reader, a nice big broad view instead of writing, a very detailed book on one little subject. The general readership out there wants to read something more general, where you cover lots of topics and really paint a picture and put all the pieces of the puzzle together. That's really what I was trying to do with it. Right. Well, actually, Chris and I hung out for a number of years.
Wow.
Before we went to Egypt, but yes, Chris definitely has a huge place in history as far as ancient Egypt goes and the research into ancient Egypt. I believe he was the first person to really identify the Great Pyramid and say, this is a device. That's really what it is. And just that single concept there alone is huge. Yeah, it is. I mean, and then to get that level of over-engineering, you have to have a whole cast of characters that are designing, that are putting together, that are building plans and timetables and equipment and whatnot. It's not a simple job that you just, wake up one morning and start throwing it together. There's a whole process. And when the construction, there's a whole process of managing the construction and making each layer of the pyramid like it's supposed to be. For example, there's 3 chambers that are in the Great Pyramid and 2 sets of shafts. Now, they built that from the bottom up. They had to cut and put those pieces into place to make the rooms and the passageways as they were laying down each course. That's not easy to do. And to make it look absolutely perfect from the inside and the outside as well is a feat that we would have a hard time doing today. Well, there's another thing. It's spending a month in Egypt, actually being there. It was kind of difficult to sense it on the Giza Plateau because the Giza Plateau is very commercialized.
It's noisy. It's very noisy.
There's hawkers everywhere, people running around. There's the police. But you can get inside the Great Pyramid. Where I really got the feeling at was in Abu Rawash, which is about 5 miles north.
Sure.
There's no one there. You go there with your driver, and you're alone. But when I was there, I could actually sense the energy of those builders, because when you build a structure, you're putting your hands and your mind are creating these structures. So there's a certain energy that's left there, that you can feel. And when I was there, to me, it was just like it was awe-inspiring that these people, the thought that really came to me was humanity has never been primitive.
Yeah.
Ever. Absolutely. And actually, you used the phrase alternative evidence, or not alternative, anomalous evidence. Really thinking about it, evidence is evidence. The only reason we call it anomalous evidence is because
we don't like it.
The people who wrote the history these past 200 or 300 years, they didn't want to believe that or think that way. So really, evidence is just evidence. And the evidence is there. You're absolutely right. That's correct. I mean, actually, to be truthful, the truth of our past can be actually stranger than we even know right now, and we don't even know it. Right. It had happened at least once before, and it can happen again. What really piques my curiosity, you mentioned evolution here a little bit. What really piques my curiosity is that if you go back in Earth history and geology, there have been 5 major extinctions and about 17 minor extinctions in Earth history. Right.
Wow.
And after each of those 5 major extinctions, there was always a big leap forward in evolution.
Okay. Sure.
Moving from one type of world to another type of world, and the last big catastrophe is where we have the dinosaurs going extinct, and the mammals becoming dominant. Well, there was a catastrophe 12,000 years ago that ended civilization X, and I have to speculate and wonder, was that another boost of evolution in some way?
We're talking
That's what the ancient Egyptians, the dynastic Egyptians, said themselves. There's 2 sources that corroborate this. The first one is the Palermo stone, and the second one is the papyrus of Turin, which is housed in a museum in Turin, Italy. Okay, both of those stones say that before the first dynastic pharaoh, Manes, the followers of Horus ruled for 13,000 years, and before that, the gods ruled for 13,000 or 23,000 years. I'm sorry, 23,000 years. So you go backward with those numbers, and you get the actual origin of Egypt, 39,000 BC, as told by the dynastic Egyptians themselves. Those are the king's list. The Palermo stone and the Turin papyrus are the king's lists. That's correct. Now the traditional Egyptologists say that the followers of Horus, and especially when Egypt was ruled by the gods, they say that's mythical, meaning that it's a fiction and it's kind of made up. But I don't believe that makes any sense at all when you look at it from a historic perspective. People write things down in history to record things. So most of that king's list, which is dynastic, okay, that's all, accurate. Well, why would that be accurate? And what comes before it be not accurate? It really doesn't make any sense. So it all has to be an historic. We have 2 types of evidence that we deal with. Me as a historian, I'm more of a historian than anything else, a historian and philosopher. I don't really specialize in machines or geology or anything like that, or archaeology. I look at the big picture and look at all the evidence. And we have 2 pieces of evidence about the past. We have the actual forensic data, which is, dug up by geologists and archaeologists and anthropologists. Okay, that's actual data that we know of. However, to actually go back there into the past, you have to have documents written by those people that were alive at the time. And I think we have to take their word for it. The historians, in our great antiquity, we must take their word for it as evidence and weigh that against the actual stuff that we find today. That's the only way to get a true sense of what history was. To do that, however, we have to start looking at mythology more seriously, even biblical mythology, from the first 10 chapters first 10 chapters of Genesis. Those first 10 chapters of Genesis was not specific to the Hebrew people. Okay, when Moses allegedly, if it was Moses, wrote those first 10 chapters, he was telling history as he understood it. And remember, Moses was an Egyptian. Anyway, the point I was getting at is that we have to take these two bodies of evidence and put them together. That's when you really start to see history as it is.
When you're a mid-sized business, you need every competitive advantage you can get. Like an AI solution that works for you, not against you. SAP Grow is built with AI embedded at its core, working across every system. And it's ready to go from day one, so you can hit the ground running. Bring it with SAP Grow, AI Cloud ERP for any size business.
¿Escuchan eso? Es el delicioso encuentro entre un Extra Crispy McCrispy Strip y la cremosa salsa César. Si así suena, solo imagínate cómo sabe. Salsa César, en McDonald's por tiempo limitado. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Right. That's absolutely true. I just finished reading, Robert Bufal has redone his Secret Chambers book. It's coming out here pretty soon. It was absolute wonderful read. I got one of the preprint copies of it.
Yeah.
And he goes into great detail on the political goings on between him and Hancock and Zahi Hawass and the Egyptians and a whole bunch of other people that was involved during the 90s and 2000s. Everyone has to read that book because it's by my publisher, Two Inner Traditions. Everyone's got to read that book because it really exposes the politics as they are. Well, no, I mean, it's not just the Egyptology. It's science in and of itself. Okay, my youngest boy is a physicist out in California.
Wow.
He's working on his PhD in materials, and I've talked with him about it for hours, and it's the same thing there. I mean, it's just the whole academic department being ultra conservative in their views and not wanting to accept the new evidence and go forward with either history or science. But specifically, Egypt is really bad about it. Right. That's the big problem right there. You just said it. We don't know if the builders of the pyramid actually did that 53 degrees to specify that date. They may have, but how would we know? That's the problem. There's no way to know. Yes, I would. Actually, I would really, really love to write a book on that subject just by itself with the Great Pyramid, because I do believe, and it has to be a belief because there's no really way to know, but it is my belief that the evidence supports the notion that the people of Civilization X, they knew what was coming. They knew that they were going to be destroyed, and they saw it in the sky, and they built the pyramids, and they aligned them to the stars, and they actually created a hidden message in what they built. Right? That they were actually creating a physical record of their existence. That's what they were doing. No, and it makes sense to me what they did because, well, let's just pretend it's going to happen today. Okay, the people in our future will probably not understand our language. There's just no way to know. So to be safe about building a record and a message for the future is to make sure that message could be understood without knowing the language.
But if
that's correct. Absolutely, man. Mathematics, well, that's correct. There's no question about it. It's the whole civilization. That this was one of the concepts that really hit me hard when I was over there. Is everywhere I went, I saw granite rubble, and behind that granite rubble was limestone framing. So you have to ask yourself the question, and we can ask ourselves the question today because, we have a civilization here. What kind of civilization builds with limestone and then sides their structures with granite? Well, what kind of a civilization does that? We don't do that. No, but they did. So just right there, they have to have high technology. And my interesting point that I always bring up is that whenever you find high technology, you're also going to find high philosophy.
For sure.
Yes, it would. Yeah. From what I remember correctly, Robert Schoch believes it's minimum 5,000 BC and probably closer to 10,000 BC. And yeah, John says that it goes all the way back to 39,000 BC. That's a question there. I've seen pictures of the Sphinx before it was patched up. And there's such deep erosion and deep cuts on the Sphinx's head that it's just by the way it looks, it could very well be 40,000 years old. Well, you have to remember, he was sticking to guidelines that science had put forth. And the survey that he did and the data he came up with, he couldn't really go beyond that point. I'm trying to get into Schoch's brain. I don't know that for sure. I'm just trying to put myself in that position as a professor of geology. That would be his approach. But you see, it's like I was talking about before. On the one hand, you have history. On the other hand, you have physical data, forensic data. You have to look at both of them and say, how does this best fit together? Yeah, it certainly does. I kind of favor that it's even older. I think it's really, really deep antiquity. This is my gut feeling because I was there and I looked at it and I walked all around it and everything. I spent a lot of time in my second book, Before the Pharaohs. I spent a lot of time reading Schoch's work. This is a decade ago too. Schoch's work, and there was a couple other geologists that were involved that also wrote papers on this Sphinx. But after being there and thinking about how much rainwater it would take to make that erosion on the Sphinx enclosure, that's a lot of rain over many, many, many thousands and thousands of years. I remember reading one report that was done in Israel about erosion, and the limestone that had eroded there with the rainfall was just very slow. So the rock doesn't erode quickly; it erodes very slow. So it could be even 70,000 years old for all we know. Well, on top of the Sphinx, let me interject this. We all know that the ancient Egyptians used animals as symbols to convey natural principles.
Sure.
And they chose the body of the cat with a human head as their most monumental statue. I always ask the question, why? Why did they do that? Right. Yeah. Why the lion? Wow. Well, it took a long time for me to really understand what they were talking about. Their philosophy, they would choose animals to represent natural principles. For example, Thoth. Everyone knows Thoth. Thoth is the ibis bird. It represents wisdom and writing. Okay. That's what the ibis represents. And why they chose the ibis bird, a stork-like bird, is because the ibis would live in the Nile River along with the crocodiles and actually feed with the crocodiles. Well, you have to be a wise bird to be able to live with crocodiles. This is their thinking on how they get, the ibis to represent wisdom. Okay, with Anubis the jackal, that represents digestion, because the jackal can eat rotten meat, rotten anything, and survive and digest it. So they were using animals to explain natural principles. Yeah. What's with the cat? This is where it gets really, really crazy about them having high philosophy. Well, most of the research about what kind of energy the ancient Egyptians were using is mostly revolving around sound. Those of us in this area of study, we all know that the Great Pyramid has resonance to it, and all the pyramids has resonance to it. So they were using sound in some way, shape, or form for their utility. Well, what's interesting about sound is it's a vibration, it's a frequency. Okay. And the foundation of our material existence here is also a vibration and a frequency. This is the basic structure of the quantum world that builds the material world. Okay. Well, the base of the lion, okay, or the base of the statue is a lion. The head is a human being. And so they're putting the head at the base of this big human head, at the base of this great big statue. What are they conveying by that? Well, the number one aspect about a cat that everyone knows about is that a cat purrs. Whenever you hold a cat, it purrs and it vibrates.
Sure.
It's a vibration. Okay. So the ancient Egyptians were looking at the cat as the symbol to convey that life is vibration.
Wow.
And at the head of that life, the pinnacle of evolution, if you want to refer to it like that, is the human species. Therefore, you have reality as it exists being a vibration symbolized by the cat, with the humanity at its pinnacle as the head of the statue. They do. Yeah. I've experienced that myself, and it has a very deep calming effect on you.
Deeply
right.
respected.
But I want to comment on that too. Why you brought it up? I don't think the Egyptians worshipped cats. I think that's our modern day dogma, going backward in time and saying, well, they did this to cats, they must have worshipped them or something like that. Okay. I have a number of cats, and I've had cats for almost a decade now. Wow. And there's something about the cat that helps a person achieve a level of awareness and communication at a very basic level. Yeah. And it's to communicate with a cat, you actually have to feel kind of what the cat's feeling.
Yeah,
it's hard to explain. And that's what I think the ancient Egyptians were doing with the cats. Is the ancient Egyptians were a highly advanced spiritual people, and they naturally had cats around them. One, they loved cats because it was a domestic animal, and two, the cats actually lived with them and helped them understand how to communicate in the spiritual world. Right. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had a physics of acoustics that they were using. They were actually using the natural occurring energy in our planet is what they were doing. They were copying Mother Nature and using Mother Nature as a guide in order to create their own energy. Correct. What frustrates me about the whole acoustics, the acoustics in physics, is there's not a lot of work out there to read about it. I've searched the internet and I've talked to my son about what's going on in the acoustics of physics, and there's really not much. No one really cares. That's unfortunate, but true. Yeah. Francois was right. There was something else. There was something else behind it, and the pioneer who did the work there is a Frenchman by the name of Schwaller de Lubicz. Wow. He actually lived in Egypt for, I think it's like 10 years, maybe even 15 years. When World War II broke out, or actually not when it broke out, it was like a year before World War II broke out. Schwaller was living in France, and I believe it was Alsace, France. And the whole French people could see the writing on the wall. Schwaller took off. Him and his wife took off and left France because they knew it was coming. And they moved to Luxor, Egypt, which is ancient Thebes. And he lived there for the next 10 to 15 years and studied the temples in Luxor along with an archaeologist friend. And his mission was to crack the philosophical culture of the ancient Egyptians, because they left a world of murals and inscriptions and statues, just a wonderful body of art and architecture. And he thought, just like Champollion, that there's got to be something behind this. It's not just pretty to look at. And Schwaller did his work, and that's where he came up with the conclusion that the ancient Egyptians, philosophically speaking, were highly advanced people, and they understood that man was the cosmos. Okay, that we are spiritual beings, and that the cosmos is a manifestation through our perception. He was. No, he was like into everything. He was a hermeticist. He was a mathematician. He was a chemist. He was an archaeologist. He was a historical researcher. He did a little bit of everything. His first book, which is not widely known, is called A Study in Numbers. Yeah. Yeah, it was published long before his Egyptian stuff does. I believe the publishing date was 1919 on his study in numbers. Anyway, in his study of numbers, what he is doing is explaining how numbers themselves create our physical universe. And I mean, he's playing off of the ideas of Pythagoras, okay, but he's taken that into a whole new area, and he's showing you how everything happens between the numbers 1 and 2. Okay, the whole foundation of our lives, of the universe, is duality, opposition.
Yeah.
Okay, and when the all, God, the great consciousness, the great spirit, whatever you want to call that thing, when that entity of absolute undifferentiating consciousness moved to create the other, it was a chain reaction that created everything. Because when first you have one represents the all. The actual number 1 represents the all. That's all there is. It's a cosmos of 1, a universe of 1. And when 1 moves and creates another, then you have 2. However, there's a relationship between 2 and 1 that continues on automatically when 2 is created from 1. That's a 3. Okay, that's the third concept, the third thing in your universe. So you have a 3-part universe that is self-creating. I'm making a long story short.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
This is where the whole concept of the Trinity comes from. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. 1, 2, 3. 1 being the all, 2 being the Son, and 3 being the interaction between the all and the Son. Now, when I say Son, I'm not referring to a gender.
Sure.
I'm just referring to an other.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And it's through that model that our entire material universe is built. This is actually kind of easy to see. If you look at the periodic chart of elements, you can see that what distinguishes one element from another element is the number of electrons and protons that are bound into the atom. So when you break our reality down, it really is number. Anyway, Schwaller did that in 1919, and it's actually a very brilliant book. He actually, this is going back to when he was there in the 1940s. He actually wrote that he was looking at the Sphinx, and he noticed. I mean, he wasn't really about the Sphinx. He was about other things. Yeah. But he looked at the Sphinx and he said, "You know what? This looks like water erosion." Yeah. Not wind erosion. He actually said that. Mm-hmm. This is back in 1940 or something like that.
So ahead of his time.
And it took another 3 decades until John Anthony West came across that. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a part of that. You're a part of that. We're all part of that, but there's a bigger picture to it, because that whole alternative research into history is actually a large throng in the paradigm shift that's going on right now.
Yeah.
The cataclysm was definitely the break 12,000 years ago. I've done some of my own research on this. There's a number of theories out there, but the one that lines up the best, the actual physical evidence lines up the best, is that a star in the Vela system 12,000 years ago went type 2 supernova.
Yeah.
And it shot a planetoid-sized ball of plasma. Here we're talking hundreds of millions of degrees. in temperature.
Yeah.
Shot this planetary-sized ball of plasma in all directions, and a piece of that came into our solar system and basically ricocheted through our solar system and came really very, very close to Earth. And part of that did break off and impact the Earth in the Great Lakes region.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, our Earth was radiated 12,000 years ago. And then we had a flood of debris and asteroids and junk that came along with this type 2 supernova that also impacted Earth.
Wow.
Why the Egyptians made it and why, this has always been a big question of mine, is why is the North American continent, why was it so pristine in history? Why did it take so long for the population to come to North America as opposed to the Eastern Hemisphere? Well, the answer, or my answer anyway, the one that has convinced me is that the Great Lakes, and there's evidence to show this, the Great Lakes was ground zero of this catastrophe that befell Earth.
Gotcha.
Okay, it totally destroyed North America, whereas it affected other parts of it. It affected the planet as a whole, but it greatly affected North America, and on the other side of the planet, on the other side of the world, where Egypt is and India is, and those areas, they weren't affected that much. Okay, they were affected, but not like we were. So what happened is there were survivors in ancient Egypt. However, if it happened today, if the big one hit today, within a few generations, we would run out of supplies. Actually, probably even before that, and within 100 or 200 years. Maybe 300 years, no one would care about what had happened in the past. They'd be worried about survival. Yeah. So, but it seems to me that even though the technology was lost, and I understand why the technology was lost, because if it happened to us today, our grandsons or great grandsons and daughters, they wouldn't need the technology that we had. The technology that we have is based upon a very complex economy, very complex economy. And, if the big one hits and 80% of the population dies, we're just going to be worried about gathering enough wood to make a fire and enough wood to build a house. There's going to be no gasoline, no cars, no trains, no buses, planes, none of that stuff is going to exist. Same thing as, happened then. The people who survived and went forward, they were unable to carry on their technology because they simply didn't need it. Now, what they did need and what they lived by was that philosophy associated with the technology. Here I'm referring to the man cosmos, the anthropocosm. Okay, their use of animals as symbolism to explain their natural philosophy. That did come forward in the survivors, and they passed that down generation after generation. And that's why it made it to dynastic Egypt. That's why it was kind of underground, or not really underground, but really not really. There's no history behind it because there's no history written. It was carried orally until the first dynasty. And then, basically the survivors, the dynastic Egyptians, they restarted their civilization that once was. Right. And that's their mythology. And if you start reading their mythology, actually, if you start really reading all mythology, if you start reading Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, Norse mythology, Sumerian mythology, even Native American Indian mythology, okay, you can start to put together a picture of this great catastrophe and what happened to us and who survived. I would love to write a book about Native American stories about mythology and the catastrophe. There's one I do remember. It's a Native American myth where it talks about the animal tent and how all these animals went into the tent in a very large size, but they came out the other side in a very small size. Okay, here they're referring to extinction. Okay, we still have the beaver, but the giant beaver of 20,000 years ago is gone. All right, we still have the mountain lion, but the saber-toothed tiger of 20,000 years ago is gone. Anyway, that mythology tells me that there were people alive and survived the catastrophe, and they remembered what happened, and they passed down the history orally. The carbon-14 anomaly, referring to the catastrophe, yes. How it all started, for the longest time, no one knew what happened 12,000 years ago. The way history and science, geology approaches it is they said, well, we had this change in climate, and then the ice age ended. The earth got warmer, and that's what happened. They really didn't know anything. But some archaeologists were working in the northeastern part of the United States, and they were uncovering mammoth and mastodon bones, and they were doing their radio-14 carbon dating on it, and they were coming up with some crazy dates way too new to be valid, because it's an archaeological fact that the mammoth went extinct like 10,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There are no mammoths today. There hasn't been any in any memory of current humanity. So they started looking around, and they noticed that as you moved west of this area, as you move west of the area, the carbon dates for the bones and the tusks started to become normal, as they should be. So they started thinking about what would cause this crazy carbon-14 dating in this northeastern area of the United States. And, the only thing they could come up with is that an atomic bomb, a very large atomic bomb, exploded that would create the differential in the carbon in the atmosphere to make these tusks and bones look like that. Well, that's not possible. No one had any atomic weapons that we know of back then. So it had to be an extraterrestrial phenomenon, like a gamma ray burst from a star blowing up. There's physical evidence to prove that. And that was a huge hit. And now we have Göbekli Tepe, which we know, it's a fact it was built 10,000 BC. And I think Dr. Schoch mentioned that to him, it looked like it was buried on purpose.
Yeah, for sure.
As if they were anticipating this coming catastrophe. Absolutely. And actually, you used the phrase alternative evidence, or not alternative, anomalous evidence. Really thinking about it, evidence is evidence. The only reason we call it anomalous evidence is because
we don't like it.
The people who wrote the history these past 200 or 300 years, they didn't want to believe that or think that way. So really, evidence is just evidence. And the evidence is there. You're absolutely right. That's correct. Actually, to be truthful, the truth of our past can be actually stranger than we even know right now. And we don't even know it.